guys! Today's video is going to be my January wrap-up. So if you've seen some of my other videos that I've been putting up over the month, I took a children's lit class during the month of January, so I read a lot of children's books. So the books on my list for my January wrap-up are all books that I read during that class. And instead of talking about all of the books that I read, because I read like over 30 books in that class, and a lot of those were picture books, like really young books that I'm not really going to mention because they're not necessarily things that I would normally read, and they're not necessarily things that I think you would be interested in. So I'm basically going to be covering the books that I read that were more of the young adult and middle grade genre, and for those I have about 7 books that I read that fell into those genres, so I'm going to be talking about those. And unfortunately, I don't really have any physical copies of these books because they're either in my dorm room, which I'm not at school right now, or I checked them out at the library on campus and I don't have them anymore, obviously. So I think I'm going to somehow incorporate them, like a photo of it, into the video somehow. So yeah. So the first book I read during this class was The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Yes, that's the author. Because that was one of the required readings for the class. I read The Secret Garden when I was in like 3rd grade and I remember loving it. It was one of my favorite books growing up and I was really excited to get into it again, as I thought I would. I loved it. There were a lot of things that made more sense to me and I feel like I got a lot more out of it now just because I'm older and like just a lot of things just kind of like, go over your head when you're young and you're reading something. It was just really good. I highly recommend it to kids and adults alike. I think it's just like a really good classic and it's just amazing. I love that book so much. The second book I read, and this was one of the other required readings, and that's The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle by Avi. This is a book that I was really excited to read because Avi was one of my favorite authors when I was young, like 9, 10, 11 years old. I loved Avi's books, but I never actually read The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle, so I was really excited to get into that. And basically, The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle was a young girl named Charlotte who is living in the 1800s, and she has to take this boat from England to America because she is in a boarding school in England and she's trying to get home to America. And anyways, ends up on this ship with like this mutinous crew and this insane captain, and like a lot of insane stuff goes on and she kind of has to deal with all of that, which is really traumatizing for her because she's just sort of like this proper little like English girl, and she ends up being put on trial for murder and like all of these scary things, and it was really good. It's a little different from stuff that I normally read because it's more historical fiction and pretty accurate historical fiction, I guess, for like the times and how people acted in the time of when the book was set. But it was really good. I really liked Charlotte. It's definitely like a younger book, so it's not young adult, but I think if you like historical fiction and you like things like that, I would recommend it. And if you're a younger reader, I definitely recommend it. I thought it was really good and I really enjoyed it. Next I read Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie, which is, it was like a like an adapted version of the original Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie, and it was really good. It was really interesting. I have never actually read the original Peter Pan, which is really kind of bad because I have a Peter Pan retelling coming out, so that's kind of awkward. But anyways, I decided, I need to read this, so I read it, and it's very different from what you assume Peter Pan is, because I think when you think Peter Pan, you think of the Disney version, which is, the most common Peter Pan that people know about, and it's very different. It's kind of creepy. Peter Pan is kind of scary and weird, and there's a lot of sort of darker tones. It's a much darker story, and it's kind of weird. It's really weird, but I enjoyed it because I like those kinds of things. I like sort of scary things, and that was my take on Peter Pan, was making it sort of darker, and to find out that the original Peter Pan is sort of already that way was really interesting. I really liked it. So if you're sort of looking for like classic children's books, I definitely recommend you read Peter Pan because it's really interesting and it's kind of unexpected. Next, I read The Reptile Room by Lemony Snicket, and that is the second book in the series of Unfortunate Events. And I'd never actually read that series. I had a lot of friends who read it when I was in elementary school, and I don't know why, but I never really got into it. I heard it was really dark, and so I wasn't really into that as a young child, so I didn't read it, but now I really like that kind of thing, and so I read it and I loved it so much. It was really, really good. I gave it 5 stars. I really want to read the other series of Unfortunate Events books, because I think there's like 10 of them. There's like a lot, and they're so quick to get through. Like I read that one in like a day, so I really want to read the others. It was really good, and I'm really like mad at myself for not reading them earlier. So yeah. Another book that I read, and this is more of the middle grade genre, and that is Doll Bones by Holly Black. And this is sort of a newer book. I believe this just came out this year or like last year or something. But it's really good. Sort of this creepy kind of horror. It's not quite horror, but it's creepy and weird. And it follows these 3 children who are like friends. They've been friends growing up, and now they're sort of reaching middle school age, and they grew up playing dolls together and like making up all of these fun stories and stuff. And so now they're reaching this age where it's kind of like, you know, you're growing out of it, and it's kind of sad, and they're sort of, you know, on the cusp of that. And what happens is one of the girls starts having dreams about this one doll, which is like this really old sort of bone china doll that kind of has this weird history. And she says that the doll is haunting her, and that it's like this dead girl who basically tells the 3 children that she needs to be buried somewhere. And then there's this whole history about the doll that they have to go figure out, and they go on this sort of journey, and it's really creepy and adventurous. But I really liked it. It was a little creepy for me in like a weird way. Like there's some creepy that I can handle, and other kinds of creepy that's a little bit too much, and this was a little bit that way for me, which surprised me because it is a middle grade novel, so it's obviously aimed at a younger audience. And I think if I had been, you know, 12 years old reading this book, I would have been really creeped out. But I don't know, it was really good though. The writing was really good, obviously, because it's Holly Black. She's amazing. The story was really well done, and I really liked all 3 characters, and they were all very different, which is something that's really difficult to do in a short book. Overall, I really liked it, and if you're into middle grade and sort of like creepy stuff, I definitely recommend it. I ended up giving it 4 stars, I believe. Next, I read The Peculiars by Maureen Doyle McQuarrie. And this is a book that I have had my eye on for a long time. I'm in love with the cover. The cover is absolutely amazing. And I just hadn't read it, but they had it at the library on campus, and so I'm like, you know what, I have to read a young adult book for this class, and this can be my young adult book. So I read it, and it's really interesting. It's a steampunk sort of story, and there are these, it's like this race of people that are sort of descendants of goblins, I guess, and they're called the Peculiars, and they're sort of like shunned from society and sort of like kicked out, basically. And the main character, Lena, has this suspicion that her father was a peculiar, and therefore she is half peculiar, and so she sort of goes on this journey to try to find her father and find out what she is, because she sort of has signs, like physical traits and things, that makes her think that she might be peculiar. And so she goes on this journey to sort of try to figure out who she is and who her father is, and what her background is and everything. And it's just really interesting. It's not as fast-paced or like adventurous as many young adult books are. It's kind of, I don't want to say slow, but there's not a lot of like adventure. It's not really, really fast. I still really enjoyed it. There was a lot of character development because there's lots of characters that she interacts with and stuff, and the world building is really well done, and it's really, really interesting, and you really get a good sort of picture of how everything looks in your mind. It's very descriptive, so I really, really enjoyed it. It's different from other things that I've read, and it has very mixed reviews, and so I understand why there are some bad reviews, but I personally really, really liked it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I just thought it was really, really interesting and really unique. So if you like steampunk and sort of unique things, it kind of reminds me of the Clockwork, what is it, Infernal Devices by Cassandra Clare. It kind of reminds me of that. It's very alike to that. But anyways, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. And the last book I read in January was Catch a Falling Star by Kim Culbertson. And this is a contemporary novel, and I really, really loved this one. I gave it 5 stars. And it basically follows, it wasn't what I thought it was about. What I said it was about in my like haul for January is not what it's about. But it's basically about this young girl. She's a teenager, and she lives in this very small town in California. And anyways, this big movie crew comes in to make this movie. And one of the cast members for this movie is this really famous sort of like teen heartthrob that everyone is in love with, and Carter is just kind of like, I don't really care. Anyways, his manager ends up contacting Carter and is like, we'll pay you to pretend to be his boyfriend because he needs sort of like good publicity and like this good image because he has sort of gotten into like bad things and stuff. So basically they convince her to pretend to be his boyfriend so that he can get some good publicity out of it. And of course, like, you know, all of this stuff happens and like, you know, she has feelings for him, but she's not supposed to because she's pretending to be his girlfriend. And it's really, really cute. It's really funny. It's really well done. I thought it was really adorable. So if you like contemporary, and this is definitely a very unique sort of contemporary romance, I highly recommend it for like anyone. I loved it. Yeah, you should go read it. So yes, that was my January wrap-up video. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of these books, your thoughts on them, if you agree with my rating and what I said about it. If you like this video, please hit subscribe, and you can follow me on Twitter for more updates about the books that I'm reading. And if you're a writer, I also have a blog where I talk about author things like writing advice, publishing explanations, and tips on the whole publishing industry, which I will leave links for all of those things below. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.